Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. All right, there's something really important that I want to convey to you. I want to express it to you because I care about you, and I want you to recognize that, I want you to recognize what's happening in this dynamic I'm going to outline for you. So there's an emotionally abusive person or someone doing hurtful behavior, someone who's difficult in controlling and manipulative ways, and they say they're going to change. They say they're going to work on themselves. And so let's say that you believe that, or at least let's say you have hope that that's true, and you're willing to give this another chance, another opportunity to make this relationship work, because you've invested so much into it. You've invested so much emotional energy, so much of your time, and you really want it to work because of the investment, because maybe you know each other so well, and maybe there are a lot of good things about the relationship, or there used to be. So you are invested in this relationship, and you want to have this, or at least what you used to have, maybe what you think you used to have, back again. And what I mean by that is sometimes we think we had it great with someone, and there were good times. Maybe at the very beginning, there were good times, and you just want those good times back. And what I'm going to talk about today is when the abusive behavior or the hurtful behavior starts to show up in the relationship. It doesn't go back to the good times and feeling safe and feeling confident that everything's great, and the bad behaviors are just a fluke that happen here and there. It usually is consistent. The hurtful behaviors, the difficulties that you started to experience, they don't end. That's what emotional abuse is. It's the consistency, it's the daily drip feeding of hurtful or belittling or intimidating behaviors that have a compound effect on your psyche and your emotional state. And day after day and interaction after interaction, it slowly disintegrates you from the inside out. And I apologize for that reference because it's not a pretty picture, but that's what it feels like. You feel it. It eats away at you. And sometimes you don't know what to do or what to say. And a lot of victims of emotional abuse will blame themselves. There must be something I'm doing. I must be doing it wrong. Maybe they're right about me. And also, maybe I'm the abusive one. They keep saying these things about me. Maybe it's true because they seem so smart. They seem so logical. It seems reasonable what they're saying. But that's often, most often, not the case. And the reason I know that is because when I hear from people that tell me, I'm really trying, I'm trying to do everything they want, and no matter what I do, it's not good enough. When I hear that, all I hear is one person pointing the finger at the other person saying, you're wrong, you're bad, you're irresponsible, you're the problem in the relationship, and I can do no wrong. I'll give you one guess who's who. I guarantee you it's not the victim of emotionally abusive behavior saying, you're wrong, you're the problem in the relationship, I can do no wrong. The victim doesn't talk like that. Someone who's being victimized doesn't talk like that. Someone who's being victimized usually says, oh, I'll try harder. I'll try to do what they want me to do. I'm doing the best I can, but it's not good enough. I'm trying, and no matter what I do, it doesn't seem like it's enough for them. So what do I do? And they're in a state of confusion. They want it to work, and no matter what they do, it just never seems like it's good enough. And so that's the victim's point of view. Whereas the perpetrator of any type of hurtful behavior, especially emotional abuse, they are pointing the finger. They believe that they're right and that they can do no wrong. And they point the finger at the victim of their behavior and say, you fix the relationship. You need to work on this. I'm not doing anything wrong. They may not use those words, but that's the mindset. It's not me, it's you. If you ever wanted to know if you're the abusive one or they're the abusive one and you can't figure it out, that's the difference. One person actually wants to try to make things work and will adapt and will change and will do everything they can to try to make things work. Where the other person says, I don't need to change. There's nothing wrong with me. It's all you. You're the problem. If you're the problem, you need to fix yourself, and then we'll both be happy. I hope you're hearing me clear, because I've had a lot of people ask me, am I the abusive one? Am I doing all the wrong things? Maybe it is me because they say X, Y, and Z, and it seems true. Maybe that is me. No, if someone is pointing the finger at you and saying, you're doing this, you're the problem, then they are the problem. They are not into a balanced relationship. They are in a power over relationship where they want to keep their power over you. And the way to do that is to keep the spotlight on you. The spotlight of judgment. The spotlight of pointing out all your wrongs. Pointing out how you're never good enough. You never do enough. You will never be enough. If somebody is telling you that, you're the victim. And I don't like using that word because victim feels like a powerless state, but that's what it feels like. It feels powerless. I don't want you to feel powerless. I want you to feel empowered. I want you to know that you have strength inside you to be able to stand up for yourself and do what you need to do for you. That doesn't mean you fight back or get into a huge argument. I'm not saying that at all, because some situations are dangerous. You have to pick your battles wisely, and some people are dangerous, and I don't want you to put yourself in a dangerous situation. But there is a point where you can only take so much before you are so emotionally damaged that it's not so much that you give up, although people do that. It's more like you've had enough. I call that the threshold. When you have had enough, you've reached your threshold. You've had enough. And when you've reached your threshold, what happens is you become empowered. You feel strong. You have a strength that hasn't been in there a long time, or maybe ever. It's in there, but you just never felt it. So when this strength comes up and you've reached your threshold and this feeling of power comes inside you, you're not going to take it anymore. You're going to say, this better stop or I'm out of here. Use your words. It's going to come out the way it's supposed to come out. You don't even have to think about it. It's going to happen because it is the ultimate in self-protection, which is self-love, which is self-respect, which is self-compassion, self-care to the fullest. You're going to be able to say this with ease. You're not going to have to prepare a speech. It's just going to come out because you've had enough. I'm done. I've had enough. No more. And so the perpetrator of abusive behavior might say, I'll change. I'm so sorry. I'll change. Because this is usually when it happens. When the victim of emotional abuse reaches their threshold, they reach that tipping point. The perpetrator finally realizes that they're going to lose something in their life. They're going to lose the person they say they love. And they don't want to lose that. And so what they'll do is sometimes they'll beg, sometimes they'll plead, sometimes they'll say, I promise I'll change. Just give me a few weeks or a few months. Stay with me while I go through these changes. And sometimes they mean it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just say what you want to hear so that you won't leave. And they do that because they still believe they're right. but they want to placate you. Now, I'm not talking about everyone. Some of the perpetrators will see that you've had enough and finally realize that they are the problem. Imagine if they finally realized, oh my God, I'm the problem. I'm the one causing all this pain and confusion and sadness in you. I'm the one causing you to go through this downward spiral, this emotional downward spiral where you're losing your passion and your zest for life. I'm the one doing that. Oh my God, I feel so awful. Boy, if that happens in the perpetrator, that is or can be a moment of change for them. And that kind of change can happen literally in minutes. I'm going to say it. I'm going to put it out there. The person who is emotionally abusive can change literally in minutes. It doesn't mean they're healed. It doesn't mean they'll never be triggered again. But that one moment of realization that they really are the cause of the relationship problems, of your unhappiness, your confusion, that one moment can change them. That one moment is empathy, at least as close to empathy as they need to feel to finally understand your perspective, to see themselves through their eyes, to feel it, and to feel awful about what they've been doing all this time. Because some of them don't realize it. Some of them are conscious about it. I know that, and it's unfortunate, but some of them aren't. They've just been this way all their life. And so they've never felt the need to change. They just want other people to change for them. There can be a moment of realization, but it almost always happens after the victim of their hurtful behavior reaches their threshold. When you reach your threshold and you say, I've had enough and I'm not going to take it anymore, it's like a light bulb goes on and they finally take their focus off of you, wanting you to change for them, and put it on themselves and ask themselves, well, is there something that I'm doing that might be causing these problems? And I know that might be surprising to hear. What do you mean? Is there something you're doing? Look at all this terrible behavior you've done. Look at how you've treated me. Look at the names you've called me or how you've made me feel after all these years. You don't know that. You can't tell that you've done that it's you that has made me feel this way. Some people don't. Some people don't recognize it. It's like if you have an itch and you scratch it, and then somebody says, you scratch your itches? You're going to say, what? What do you mean? Of course I scratch my itches. But you don't think about it. It's just when you're itchy, you scratch it. It happens. It's a natural response. And that's often the case with unconscious emotionally abusive people, is that they don't realize that their responses are so natural that they could be lifelong coping mechanisms that they've never addressed. And so they get stuck into a pattern, and because they are lifelong coping mechanisms that they've never addressed, they don't think there's anything wrong with them, or a lot of them don't think there's anything wrong with them. So they continue to do the behaviors because they've learned that there's really no accountability for their natural responses. When there's no accountability, why change? And a lot of them will see the person they're hurting as them doing it to themselves. And unfortunately, I speak from experience here because I used to be that person. I used to be someone who would make my partner feel guilty for not doing what I want them to do. And I would make them believe that they were hurting themselves. And that's a really terrible thing to do to another person, is to manipulate them into believing that they are causing their own suffering. Because that's what happens to a lot of victims of emotional abuse. They believe they're causing their own suffering, or they believe they are the reason that they are suffering because they're not good enough, or they're not trying hard enough, or whatever the abusive person wants them to believe. They'll convince in so many words and so many actions that the victim is the real perpetrator. So not only are you trying to understand what you might be doing wrong to create the mess that the relationship is in, but you're also dealing with somebody who is reminding you how wrong you are and how awful you are or whatever. They're reminding you that you are the problem, even though you're not. Most of the time, the victim of behaviors like this is not the problem. And in many cases, when the victims of this type of behavior reach out to me and ask me, well, am I the problem? Am I doing all this? Maybe I am. Maybe I'm the one. I ask them a simple question. Are you willing to adapt and change to accommodate that person? Because the perpetrator of hurtful behavior, the emotionally abusive person, isn't willing to adapt and change. That's the very simple test. Who is the emotionally abusive person? The one who is not willing to see their own faults, not willing to change, not willing to take responsibility for anything wrong in the relationship because they believe they can't do anything wrong, and is pointing the finger at the other person, saying they're the problem and they should fix themselves. And once they fix themselves, we'll both be happy. 9 out of 10 times, or 99 or 999 times out of 1,000, that is the perpetrator of emotionally abusive behavior. That doesn't mean that both people can't be that way. Doesn't mean that both people are difficult in some ways. But 999 times out of 1,000, it's going to be the perpetrator who is that way. And one time out of 1,000, you'll have two emotionally abusive people that just happen to get together. It doesn't happen often, but it can happen. They can get together and cause havoc in each other's lives. But usually what I see is the matching, the complementary type of relationship where the emotionally abusive person finds someone who is kind and caring and supportive and generous and overly compassionate and willing to take the blame on things and willing to forgive fast. You know, all the wonderful qualities that a person should have in especially a relationship, all those wonderful qualities get turned around and used against you. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have those qualities. I'm saying that when you do, there is a chance that somebody might come along and take advantage of those qualities. That's why it's complementary. The abusive person will find a supportive, caring, kind, compassionate, forgiving person to victimize. And that's just the way it is. And I don't want the kind and caring and supportive person to change. I just want them to be aware. So if that's you, if you consider yourself a kind, caring, compassionate, generous, supportive person, definitely don't change those things about yourself. Just know that good qualities can be taken advantage of. Good qualities are wonderful to have. You should definitely keep them and definitely spread the love. But also know that because those are such good qualities, someone might come along and exploit those qualities. So it's just important to be aware of that. So there were two things that I wanted to talk about in this episode. And I did mention one, that change, somebody who wants to change and really is experiencing change, can happen quite fast. But what you'll see, and this is the important part, what you'll see is a different person. You won't see the old them come back. You'll see somebody new that you don't even recognize. When the emotionally abusive person changes, when they start healing, and I've seen this many, many times, hundreds, if not thousands of times, with the people that I've worked with in my programs, the victim of their behavior doesn't recognize who they are because the change was so profound that the perpetrator of emotionally abusive behavior no longer acts in accordance with their old nature. Their old nature was based on old survival mechanisms, probably from childhood, probably from trying to get through the moment or through the day or through their childhood in general in their family. And they took those old coping mechanisms and brought them into adult relationships. And as an adult, life is different. So when you bring old childhood coping mechanisms into adult relationships, it could be a big failure. But you don't recognize it. If you're the one doing these old coping mechanisms, you may not realize they're toxic because they used to work. And what used to work, we typically continue doing. And if our results are terrible, we don't blame what used to work because we believe it still works. How we used to cope with challenges still works. So it's not me. I can't be the problem. They must be the problem because the way I cope has worked all my life. It has gotten me through all these challenges. So here I am in an adult relationship doing the same things I know to do that help me get through all these challenges. And the other person's acting all weird. The other person is not doing what I expect or what I want them to do. So they must be the problem. Now, of course, the perpetrator is not going to think this way. They're not going to say, oh, it's my coping mechanism, and I'm using the same coping mechanism that I used from childhood, trying to survive my childhood or whatever. So they're not going to think that way. What they're thinking is, why isn't the other person doing what I want them to do? And so it puts them in a mind state that is totally foreign to so many people. Because the victim of their behavior is wondering, why the hell are you hurting me? Why are you doing these things? I thought you loved me. If you loved me, you wouldn't do these things. I don't understand. And many emotionally abusive people are wondering, why the heck aren't you complying or submitting to what I want? Because this is how it goes. This is what works for me. And they don't really consider what works for you. They don't want to consider accepting you as you are, which is a big problem. When we don't accept somebody for who they are and the decisions they make for themselves, for their own life, then what we end up sometimes trying to do is trying to control them. And we know that controlling somebody else is wrong. It's bad, it's hurtful, and it will destroy the relationship. For anyone listening, maybe you've not heard me before, or maybe you're an emotionally abusive person and you want to learn more about this, stop trying to control people you care about. Period. Don't try to control people you care about. Everyone wants their autonomy, their independence, and the belief that they can make decisions that won't be scrutinized, and we just want somebody who accepts us for who we are. We want somebody who loves us for who we are. Even if we disagree with them, we accept them. Even if we don't like what they're doing, we love them. That is part of being in a relationship, is accepting somebody for who they are, accepting what makes them happy and supporting what makes them happy. That's a loving, healthy, long-lasting, typically, relationship. People who emotionally abuse, they don't want to accept the other person as they are. They need the other person to be who they want them to be. If they are not who the perpetrator wants them to be, the perpetrator is going to try to shape and mold them into the person they want them to be. So it's hard to, you can't win in that situation. If somebody is shaping and molding you and controlling you, you will never win because you will never be perfect enough. And they are holding the reins sometimes. They are in full control and you feel like you can't do anything about it. You have to submit. But no matter what you do, it's not good enough because you will never be the perfect person for them. I have an episode on that. You will never be good enough for the emotionally abusive person. Ever. You can't ever be good enough for the emotionally abusive person. And the only reason I say that isn't because you're not good enough. It's because they will never be able to accept you as you are. Even if they change who you are, they can't accept you. That's why the abusive behavior continues, because you'll never be enough for them. Even when you do everything exactly the way they want it, they will point out the flaws in your attempt to meet their standard. And so, that's a downer, I know. And I only say that because I don't want you to try too hard to please someone who is unpleasable. There may be moments where they're pleased, but I don't want you to try so hard that you turn your life upside down just to please someone else who is completely unpleasable. It's not worth it. Some people are not pleasable until they learn that they are responsible for their own happiness. They're responsible for their role in the relationship. They're responsible for their own behaviors. And when they realize that, and they also realize that they're hurting you, and they finally feel empathy and realize, oh my God, what am I doing? This is terrible. I can't believe I'm that person. I don't ever want to be that person again. that's when you may actually see real change. That's usually when it happens, when they have reached a tipping point themselves. Now you might see real change, but quite often by then, you've reached your threshold and you won't take any more. Then maybe you have no more resilience left and no more toleration for bad behavior left. And maybe they have one more chance to make things right, or maybe no chances. Depends if you sealed your heart or not. Because a lot of people who reach their threshold end up sealing their heart. Some don't. Some still want things to work out, but they reach that threshold anyway. I wish everyone would reach their threshold before they seal their heart shut, because then there's an opportunity to maybe salvage the relationship, because if there's still love in your heart, there's an opportunity, there's a chance, but both people have to want it. And the hurtful person has to never want to be that person again. It has to be inside them. It can't be them looking at you saying, oh, I don't want to hurt you anymore because you'll leave me, which is, I'll change for you. It needs to be them thinking in their own head and even saying out loud, I need to change for me. Whether you are in my life or not, I realize just how awful I've been. It makes me sick. I never want to be that person again. I need to change for me. And so again, bringing it back to my first actual point of this episode, it is, if you really want to know if someone has changed, all you have to do is ask yourself if you recognize the person they are now. And what I mean by that is, are they showing up as who they used to be, or are they showing up as someone you don't recognize? I think that's an important distinction. And I'm not saying it's completely 100% true all the time, but most of the time, 999 times out of 1,000, it's true. This is what you see when someone actually stops being emotionally abusive and heals, working on their emotional triggers and becoming a new person, because they've reached that state of empathy. They've seen themselves through your eyes, and they realize how awful they've been, and they feel almost sick to their stomach thinking about how much they hurt someone they loved, and they commit to never being that person again. And when they do that, when all those factors are in place, you don't recognize who they've become, because they've never been that person before. So you won't recognize them from the beginning of the relationship. So if things go back to the way they were at the beginning of the relationship, I would stay highly and acutely aware of what happens in the next few months. So if you are getting along great, just like you did at the beginning of the relationship, stay aware, stay observant, because I don't want you to get sucked into a dynamic that is toxic or abusive again. And you'll see it, because this doesn't last. If somebody is emotionally abusive and they're listening to this right now and they say, oh, all I have to do is meet those factors and just pretend to be those things, pretend that I'm hurt, that I hurt them. Oh, that should be easy. Hey, you can give that a shot, but the problem is it doesn't last, because that doesn't reflect actual change. And what ends up happening, especially after a few months, usually 2 to 4 months, but I've seen it go as far as 6 months, usually within that time frame, their old behaviors come back, because they can't stop it. They can't stop their inner nature. If they haven't changed, that nature is still there, and it's going to come out, which is why you have to stay acutely aware and highly observant of their behaviors. And this is important, you may want to test those triggers. Anything that triggered them, you might have to test. You might have to challenge them. That means if you like to talk to your ex every now and then because you're friends, or because you still have things you want to talk about, and it's not an emotional affair or romantic or anything like that, but it's just a friend, and that used to trigger them, that might be a good test. And I'm not saying you have to do the test. You just have to talk about it. Like if they say, oh, I've changed, or I am changing, I promise. Then you say, okay, so if I call my ex, you'll be okay with it. Let's see how that goes. Again, don't pick battles you know are going to be difficult. Some people may not make this easy for you, but if you really believe that they have changed, or you have a lot of hope that they have, you do kind of have to test these things. You do have to put them through the trials, and the trial is just talking about it, bringing it up, so you won't be jealous when I go out with my friends. So you won't be upset if I eat a whole cake by myself. You might have to bring these things up and see how they react. See if they are congruent in their body language and in their words. Because you want to hear, you know what, that used to bother me. And I totally understand why you'd say that, but I think I'm okay with it now. Now, there's that I think. They might say that, I think I'm okay with it now. But you're talking about it. You're bringing it up. And they're still maybe working on their healing. So that's a good sign that they admit what they used to do and they admit how they used to feel. And you bring it up. Now, total congruence is, yeah, no problem. I'll buy the cake. Yeah, no problem. I'll give you tickets to go out with your friends. That's great. I hope you have a good time. That's total congruence and a total step in the right direction. And you're not going to hear about it later. Like a week later when they say, well, you went out with your friends, and you ate that whole cake and, that's just not good for you. And you're not going to hear that. You're not going to feel like you're being judged or criticized. It's not going to be there. Why? Because they've changed. That's what you're looking for. Congruent, healthy behavior. Supportive behavior, supporting the decisions that you want to make for yourself. And I'm not saying that they have to like everything you do. I'm just saying that they support you doing what you want to do for yourself. Because what happens when somebody supports you wanting to be yourself? What happens when somebody accepts you exactly as you are? Do you want to do more things without them? Or do you want to do more things with them because you feel so good being supported for being who you are? That's how I look at it. You can tell I'm passionate. That's how I look at it. If somebody accepts you and supports you for who you are, that is the opposite of abusive behavior. That is love. That is the opposite of control. It is love. That is the opposite of manipulation. It is love. Love and acceptance. Love and acceptance leads to connection and bonding and a long-lasting relationship. Unless there are other things going on. Maybe there are incompatibilities that you just can't work out. That happens. And hopefully you can talk about it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then maybe you have to go your separate ways. But hopefully that is a mature conversation that you can have if you need to. So anyway, I want to wrap this up. There's a second point. There's a second point I wanted to make. And this has to do with the emotional abuser's family. Some perpetrators of that behavior, they're going to have a mom or a dad or a sister or a brother or whatever that talks to you and tells you, just give them one more chance. I know they're a good person. They're going to change. They're going to heal. They're going to work things out. Just give them one more chance. No, don't listen to family. Sorry to be so demanding, but you can't listen to an abusive person's family tell you about how great the abusive person is, because the abusive person or hurtful person or difficult person has been in that family dynamic all of their life. And because of that, the behaviors that they're doing have come from that dynamic. And that might mean that the other people, the people in their family, have also either experienced it themselves, are doing it themselves, or are doing other behaviors that caused the abusive, difficult, hurtful person to do those behaviors or develop coping mechanisms that are dysfunctions and toxic in adult relationships. So there are people that have been in a family dynamic that actually created the behaviors that are working against you right now. So when their family comes to you and says, you just got to give them one more chance, just give them a chance, I know they're a good person, and tries to make you feel guilty or whatever, trying to tell you that this person really will change or just give them one more chance, I give a huge no to that. No, don't listen to them. They are part of the dynamic that the perpetrator has been in for a long time, all their life. They have been in that dynamic. So just like it's natural to the perpetrator, it is also natural to the family. And the family may not see the perpetrator's behaviors because just like the perpetrator has natural responses to their environment, to the people around them that are actually hurtful and controlling and manipulative, the family's understanding and witnessing of those behaviors in their own dynamic may seem perfectly normal to them, which is why this can happen. Their family may not be a good source for the decisions you need to make for yourself. The difficult person's family may also be difficult. The toxic person's family may also be toxic. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they'll say, you need to do what's right for you. That's healthy. That's a great response. If their family is saying something like that to you, that's supportive. But if you're being made to feel guilty or wrong by their family, it's the same stuff. It's emotional abuse. And you don't want to be a victim to them as well. I've really drilled some things into you today, and I do it with love and care for your well-being, and just so that you're aware of what to look for, so that you don't get stuck into a situation that you don't know enough about to get yourself unstuck out of that situation. So I may have really loaded your brain today, and I apologize about that. And I was a little bit more passionate than normal because this is a subject matter that comes up quite a bit, and I want to make sure that you have the resources you need to take the right steps for you. I support the decisions you make for yourself. That's what you should hear from everyone in your life. I support you. I support the decisions you make for yourself. Doesn't that feel good? It feels good to me. I'm glad you joined me today. I hope this was helpful. Share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook helps you pinpoint exactly what's going on in your relationship, outlining the behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Take the assessment in the workbook and gain clarity on what your next best steps are. After you purchase the workbook, you'll get an invite to the private peer support group on Facebook. Visit Love and Abuse for more information. And if you've discovered that you are doing the hurtful behaviors to someone you care about and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. You can take the course on your own, at your own pace, or join the optional private online group where I and others will give you direct support. That's healedbeing.com. And if you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show where all the titles to the episodes are changed, click on the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant because you are. We'll talk again soon.